I am Douglas MacArthur, one of the most important generals in U.S. military history. I was born on January 26, 1880, in Little Rock. I grew up in a family with a strong military tradition. My father was a captain in the U.S. Army, and my mother was a fantastic wife and a very devoted mother. I was brought up in a military and disciplined environment, in which my mother encouraged me to pursue a military career from an early age. My childhood was marked by several changes due to my father's work. I attended Force Public School, where I was named valedictorian with a high average, the West Texas Military Academy and the United States Military Academy, where I also excelled academically, graduating first in my class in 1903. During all these years, I showed great dedication to my studies and military training. I began my military career as a second lieutenant in the Army Corps of Engineers, and over the years, I held several important positions, including Superintendent of the Military Academy from 1919 to 1922, and Commander of the American Forces in the Philippines, participating in various military missions including the suppression of conflicts. During the First World War, I distinguished myself and rose even higher, being appointed Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army in 1930 and later Military Advisor to the Government of the Commonwealth of the Philippines in 1935. I retired from the Army in 1937 and continued as the Philippines' Chief Military Advisor, but was called back into service in 1941 as Commander of the United States Army Forces in the Far East. It was in this year that I knew the world was on the verge of a big transformation. The attack on Pearl Harbor marked the beginning of the war in the Pacific and changed the course of my life in American military history. As soon as I took over, my mission was clear: to defend the Philippines against the growing Japanese threat. However, soon after the declaration of war, on December 8, 1941, my air forces suffered a devastating blow. The surprise attack on Clark Field resulted in the destruction of a large part of my air fleet, leaving me in a very vulnerable position. The Japanese forces quickly advanced and, within a few months, we were forced to retreat to the Bataan Peninsula. For me, the resistance in Bataan was a test of courage and determination. For months, we faced adverse conditions, with scarce resources and an increasingly strong enemy. In March 1942, with the situation becoming untenable and the Japanese forces leading our troops to final defeat, I was ordered to evacuate in order to preserve the military leadership, and so I left the Philippines, a country that meant so much to me and that I promised to return to. As soon as I arrived in Australia, I took control of the Allied forces in the Southwest Pacific area, and from then on I prepared a series of successful operations. It was at the Battle of Guadalcanal, with innovative tactics and strategy, that we finally began to beat the Japanese, a very important victory. Finally, in October 1944, I fulfilled my promise to return to the Philippines with the invasion of Leyte. The battle was very intense and demanded everything of our forces, but in the end we managed to liberate the Philippines, an exciting and symbolic moment. As well as being a military victory, it was a vindication of our commitment to freedom and justice. In August 1945, Japan was in a critical situation after years of war. The Allied forces, under my command, were advancing on several fronts, but still Japanese resistance continued. President Harry Truman and his advisors believed that the use of nuclear weapons could force a quick surrender and prevent a ground invasion, and so it was. On August 6, 1945, the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima and 3 days later on Nagasaki. The bombings resulted in enormous destruction and loss of life. In Hiroshima, around 70,000 people died instantly and many others suffered the consequences of the radiation. Nagasaki faced a similar fate, with tens of thousands of deaths. The devastation was so great that many questioned the morality and necessity of using the bombs. Although I was aware of the development of the atomic bomb, I had no direct influence on the decision to use it. After the bombings, Japan surrendered in August 1945, and I was appointed Supreme Commander of the Allied forces in Japan. I had a clear objective: to demilitarize and democratize Japan to ensure that it would never again pose a global threat. So, over the next few years, I implemented reforms that transformed Japan. The education system was demilitarized and democratized to eliminate militaristic ideologies and promote democratic values. Labor laws were reformed based on progressive Western models to guarantee workers' rights, and an agrarian reform was put into practice that redistributed around 40% of arable land to peasants, dismantling family monopolies that dominated Japanese agriculture. These changes stabilized the country after the war and laid the foundations for what would come to be known as the Japanese miracle. Economic stabilization included measures to control inflation and encourage investment in manufacturing. The Japanese economy grew rapidly over the following decades, becoming one of the largest in the world. I began to look at Japan as it was being reborn and realized that as well as shaping a new government, I was helping to create a new national identity. Relations between the United States and Japan underwent a major transformation during this period. In 1950, North Korea, supported by the Soviet Union and China, invaded South Korea. The invasion was an attempt to unify the peninsula under a communist regime. The UN Security Council authorized the defense of South Korea. I was appointed commander of the UN forces and led troops mainly from the United States. This war became known as the Korean War and continued until 1953, resulting in the permanent division of Korea into two distinct nations, North Korea and South Korea. In 1951, after years of service and some political controversies during the Korean War, I was dismissed by President Truman. I returned to the United States as a national hero, but also as someone who faced challenges and made difficult decisions along the way. I died on April 5, 1964, at the age of 84. During my lifetime, I received more than 100 military decorations from the United States and other countries. My popularity among the American public was immense. Streets, public works and even dance steps were named in my honor. In 1961, Time magazine described me as a flawless hero. For Filipinos, every step of my life created my personal destiny and influenced the future of nations.